I had a professor in rabbinical school named Rabbi Joseph Lakinsky, alav shalom, who was a professor of Jewish education, a really wonderful man, and he was going to be a professional baseball player. I mean, you could see it in his physique. He decided to be a rabbi instead, and he did a lot of good in the world. I don't know if he would have done any good at being a baseball player, but that's up for debate. But here is an interesting thing. I took a lot of education courses with him because they just interest me, and he was a really smart and he was a really decent man. And there's one thing that he said to us that you'll see is self-evident in my remarks. He said, the goal for a Jew is not to study the weekly portion. The goal of a Jew is to become the weekly portion. I mean, just think about it. Every week when we read the Torah, whatever it's dealing with, we're supposed to deal with those issues. And you'll see it's self-evident what I'm speaking about. One of the decisions that all of us have to decide in our lives is what our final arrangements are going to be. What happens after we will die? What is our family supposed to do? Jane and I do not know where we will be buried. We have neglected it, most probably out of denial. But it is an issue that we must confront. And we have to make some judgments, some calculations about the future of our lives. There are many factors, one of them being, it is traditional for your family to visit your family graves before the high holidays and on a yurt site. We want to make that possible. We could be buried in Kansas City. I'm sure that the New Reformed Temple will give us graves, and they won't charge us. That should be put into the bylaws. You don't charge the rabbi when he dies. Okay, but our family would not visit us. At one time, we wanted to be buried in the land of Israel, but we don't have family there now. One other good possibility is being buried in Troy, New York, where I grew up. My entire family, I mean, on both sides, my mother's side, my father's side, they're all buried in these 3 adjacent cemeteries, and my kids live now within distance, driving distance, but living in eternity in Troy, New York is not my notion of the world to come. And Jane's family are buried in Connecticut, but only part of her family. We have a dilemma, and I'm not looking for any advice, but we got to get our acts together. It's an interesting dilemma, but it's a biblical dilemma. It's the beginning of the entire Torah portion is just about this issue. It's a major concern of Abraham. In our portion, Sarah dies, and he must find a place to bury her. And he's living in the land of the Hittites, they're one of the Canaanite tribes, and they're not great, but they're okay. Let's put it that way. And he wants to own a family plot that will be in the possession of his family for eternity. And therefore he addresses the Hittites in Canaan with a request. He says, I am a stranger and a resident, a ger v'toshav, a resident alien among you. Give me an inherited burial place with you that I may bury my dead before me. So he negotiates with Ephron, a Hittite landowner, who initially offers it to him for free, but he ends up insisting that he should purchase it, and he does. And at the very end of this section of the Torah, it says, so Ephron's land in Machpelah, near Mamre, the field with its caves and all the trees, anywhere within the confines of that field passed, to Abraham as his possession, in the presence of the Hittites, of all who entered the gates of his town. So in a very public way, people knew it was his land. He wasn't just given the right to do it. It was his land. It was his burial spot. Not just for him, but for generations to come. And then Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Thus the field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site. And today you can visit it. although the tension on the West Bank makes it somewhat dangerous to do it, but theoretically you can. The last time that I went there was with a bunch of rabbis, and we had to go in a bus that was like glass was this thick. It's not really a safe place to go. Now the term ger v'toshav is quite interesting. It seems contradictory. How can one be both a resident and a stranger? It's an oxymoron. They do not appear to make any sense together. Why does Abraham at this sad moment in his life refer to himself as a resident alien? So the great biblical commentator Rashi says, Abraham said, I am a stranger, having come from another land, but I have settled down amongst you. So Rashi is saying, Abraham has moved to Canaan from another land and would like to settle. Purchasing property to bury his dead would indicate a desire to remain permanently in the land. And out of respect to the locals, he would be appropriate for Abraham to present himself as a resident alien. He didn't want to come across as they had a chutzpah. I get it. I want to dwell here, but I know I'm a little bit separate from you guys. Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, who is the leading philosopher, intellectual, rabbinic scholar of 20th century Orthodox Jews, analyzes this expression. And I found it in an article by his great nephew, Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, who's another great scholar. So Rabbi Soloveitchik writes it this way. He says, the first patriarch Abraham introduced himself to the inhabitants of Canaan with the words, I am a stranger and a resident among you. Are not these two terms mutually exclusive? That's what I already asked. But the truth is that Jews have forever believed that these two terms are not mutually exclusive. Abraham was engaged with the general society. He interacts with it and its people. But then Rabbi Soloveitchik goes on to say, Abraham's definition of this dual status, we believe, describes with profound accuracy the historical position of the Jew who resides in a predominantly non-Jewish society. He was the resident like the other inhabitants of Canaan, sharing with them a concern for the welfare of society, digging wells, contributing to the progress of the country, and loyalty to its government institutions like us. Here, Abraham was clearly a fellow citizen, a patriot among compatriots, joining others in advancing the common welfare. But this is where the other part comes in. He says, however, there was another aspect, the spiritual, in which Abraham regarded himself as a stranger. His identification and solidarity with his fellow citizens in the secular realm did not imply his readiness to relinquish any aspects of a religious uniqueness. He was of a different faith, and he was governed by perceptions, truths, observances that set him apart from the larger faith community. In other words, he was a citizen, but he was Jewish too. He had his own way of looking at the world. I mean, that's what Jews do. We're not like everyone else. We look at the world differently, and that's okay. And Rabbi Soloveitchik further argues that when welcomed as equals in a democratic society, Jews should seek the example of Abraham. And this is what he says. I want us to chew on this a little bit. He says, as a citizen of a pluralistic society, the Jew assumes the social and political obligations to contribute to the general welfare and to combat such common dangers as famine, corruption, disease, foreign enemies, in order to maintain freedom, dignity, and security of human life. The Jew, however, has another identity which he does not share with the rest of mankind, the covenant with God, which was established at Mount Sinai over 3,000 years ago. A Jew is a stranger and a citizen, a stranger and a neighbor, a stranger and a resident. I think he's making an incredible point that kind of helps us deal with the confusion sometimes of what does it mean to be Jewish in America, and what does that mean? What he's saying is, what does it mean to be a Jew in America? We are not expected to assimilate. Abraham's example is we can be both strangers and neighbors, proud Jews and equal citizens, what Abraham sought. This is the guidepost as a Jew and an American. And this is how I look at it. I mean, this is, I'm not telling you how to look at it. This is how this helps me. I want to participate in everything that our country has to offer. I'm not good in following professional sports teams. You know that already. But I want them to be there, something that I can ignore. I embrace being a toshav, a resident, a citizen. It's a blessing. I believe in a reverence for our country, feeling an attachment and commitment to our nation. I owe it to this country, but I don't want to give up my Jewishness. My belief that my religions and my identity shapes me, it guides me, it defines me. I don't know when I get up out of bed and go into the world, if I'm not wearing that Jewish lens, I don't really know where I am. I am also a ger, an outsider, separate. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, there was this term in the sociological term, the melting pot metaphor, which is used to describe how immigrants who come to America eventually become assimilated into American culture, and thus creating multiple cultures that have blended into one. I don't like that. My metaphor is a salad bowl. I think we should be a salad bowl. A salad bowl metaphor is preferable to me, describing immigrants who came to America, combining their cultures with others, but still retaining their own cultural identity. Basically, America is one big integration of unique, distinct cultures. We Jews should embrace and connect with all people. But when we give up our otherness, our distinctiveness, we have forsaken our heritage and deprived America of the gifts of our tradition, culture, and values. We're of best use to America when we are expressing who we really are. Now, one of the ways that we are transmitting this to our confirmation class is our trip that we're scheduled in February, and we will gather in Washington with 450 other Jewish teenagers in the Reform movement to participate in this wonderful offering of the Reform movement. It's called the Litakein Social Justice. I mean, Litakein means to correct, to fix. Tikkun olam, you've heard that term. Litakein is the infinitive. The program is designed to expose our teenagers to a variety of public policy issues and to explore Jewish values that inform the Reform movement. We make Shabbat together with worship and meals. And the teenagers will also have the opportunities to attend programs on Israel, climate change, racial justice, finance reform, economic justice, reproductive rights, LGBTQ+ rights, anti-Semitism, immigration. And the seminar culminates with students presenting a speech to their members of Congress on the topics of their choice. Literally, we're going to meet our congresspeople and our senators. Why is this program important? Because it is the affirmation of being a ger v'toshav, a proud citizen invested in this country, yet being with other Jewish teens affirming their Judaism, their unique heritage, their special lens. We're teaching them that America does not require them to give up their heritage. It's just the opposite. America demands of us to affirm our uniqueness, to hold on to it, to use it for the betterment of our nation. Abraham has defined for all of us the challenge of a Jew, caring for our country, but also being able to hold on to our own identity. This is not easy, but it's necessary to preserve the richness of a Jewish community and of our nation. America needs the Jews need America. Let's make it a marriage made in heaven. Shabbat Shalom.